Marcus Devin Cole didn't just walk into rooms, he arrived. At 34, he was the kind of man magazines manufactured cover stories around. Built like a linebacker but educated like a scholar, Marcus had turned a single real estate firm his late grandfather left him, a crumbling office on the east side with 2 employees and a leaky ceiling, into a billion-dollar empire that stretched from Atlanta to Dubai. His name moved money. His phone calls moved people. And when Marcus Cole scheduled a meeting, CEOs cleared their calendars and called their assistants twice to confirm. He had the penthouse, the fleet of cars, the tailored suits flown in from Milan, the kind of quiet power that didn't need to announce itself because everyone in every room already knew. But Marcus Devin Cole had not laughed, really laughed, from somewhere deep in his chest. In almost 3 years, he had tried. Lord knows he tried. There was Vanessa, stunning and sharp-tongued, who had smiled at his mother across the dinner table and said, with genuine curiosity, "So does Marcus ever think about consolidating your properties into the estate now? You know, for tax purposes?" His mother, a retired school teacher from Decatur, Georgia, had set down her fork and never looked at Vanessa the same way again. Then came Simone, who told him plainly 6 months into their relationship that she didn't plan on working once they got married. "You have enough for both of us, baby. More than enough." When he asked what she imagined her days would look like, she described a life so hollow it echoed. He ended things that same night. And then there was Priya, the one he truly believed in. Beautiful, ambitious, kind at first. But he had found the text messages, the plans she and her cousin had constructed, detailed as a business prospectus about leveraging a relationship with Marcus Cole into seed funding and social capital. When he confronted her, she hadn't even looked guilty. "Marcus, this is just how people operate," she'd said. "You're a resource." A resource. He had sat with that word for a long time afterward. It wasn't bitterness that moved into him after Priya. It was something quieter and more dangerous. Indifference. Marcus stopped looking. He stopped hoping. He showed up to charity galas and industry dinners and smiled when required and left when permitted. And he told himself that a man could build a full life without love. And that peace was its own kind of wealth. His Aunt Diane, bless her heart, didn't agree. "Marcus Cole, you are not a monk," she announced every Thanksgiving, usually somewhere between the sweet potato pie and the second round of arguments about football. "God made you beautiful and rich and smart, and you are just sitting up in that glass tower collecting dust. Find yourself a good woman, baby." "I'm fine, Aunt Diane." "You are not fine. Fine people don't sigh that much." He sighed. She pointed. "May see?" His mother stayed quieter about it, but sometimes he caught her watching him with a softness in her eyes that was worse than Aunt Diane's speeches. His mother, Dorothy Cole, believed in love the way she believed in church on Sundays and good seasoning, as a non-negotiable, foundational truth. She had loved his father fiercely until the day cancer took him, and she had never once suggested that was a mistake. "When it's real," she told Marcus once, "you'll know. Sure, because it won't feel like a transaction. It'll feel like coming home." Marcus had filed that away with all the other things he believed were beautiful and impossible. Then came the Thursday that changed everything. It started ordinarily enough. A board meeting that stretched 4 hours past schedule. Projections, disputes. A junior partner who kept clearing his throat before speaking as if every sentence required a formal announcement. By 6 in the evening, Marcus was sitting at the head of the conference table staring at a spreadsheet and feeling the specific, exhausting emptiness of a man who has accomplished everything he set out to accomplish and still feels like something is missing. He made a decision. He left his security team in the lobby. He told his driver to go home. He slipped out through the building's side exit, changed in his car into dark jeans and a plain gray hoodie he kept in his trunk for no particular reason. Maybe for this, maybe for the version of himself he was only sometimes allowed to be. And he walked. He ended up in a part of the city he hadn't visited since he was young. Before the money, before the empire. A neighborhood where the streetlights were spaced too far apart and the music from the corner bar bled out onto the sidewalk without apology. He walked into that bar, sat at the far end, and ordered something simple. He didn't want to get drunk. He just wanted the noise inside his head to quiet down. For almost 2 hours it did. He sat there watching people argue and laugh and spill drinks and reconcile, and he felt something almost like peace. Anonymous, invisible, just a man in a gray hoodie, nobody in particular. He stayed too long. By the time he stepped out, the night air hit him wrong. He'd only had 2 drinks, but his body registered the combination of heat and emotional exhaustion and low blood sugar from skipping lunch, and the world tilted sharply. His feet went wrong beneath him. He tried to catch himself on a parked car, missed, and went down hard on the sidewalk. Not gracefully, not in any way a man with a billion-dollar reputation wanted to go down. Just down. His cheek against the concrete, the sky above spinning slowly. People noticed immediately. "Aye, somebody's drunk," a man said loudly, standing over him. "Leave him, he'll get up. Probably been out here all day begging. Don't touch him, or you don't know what he got on him." Marcus could hear every word. He tried to push himself up. His arms didn't cooperate. The world kept tilting. He was aware of a small crowd forming, could hear the sound of phones coming out. For video, not for help. And something mortifying and clarifying happened in that moment. The richest man in the city was lying on a public sidewalk, and not one single soul was reaching down. Then the crowd shifted. Excuse me. Please, move." The voice was firm but soft. A woman's voice. Not aggressive, not loud, just absolutely certain it would be obeyed. The crowd parted. He heard her kneel beside him before he saw her. "Sir, hey, can you open your eyes for me?" He managed to turn his head slightly. She was young, maybe late 20s, wearing jeans that had seen better years and a jacket that was thin for the October air. Her hair was natural, pulled back with a yellow scrunchie, a few loose coils framing her face. No makeup, no pretense. She pressed 2 fingers gently to the side of his neck. Checking his pulse, he realized she actually knew what she was doing. "He's burning up," she said to no one and everyone. "This isn't drunk. He's sick." "Girl, don't get involved," someone warned. She ignored them completely, like they were weather. What happened next, Marcus would describe differently depending on who asked. To his board years later, he would say, "A woman helped me off the sidewalk." To his mother, he would say, "I met someone who reminded me what people are supposed to be." But in his private heart, the truest version was this. She came through a crowd of people who saw nothing worth stopping for, knelt down in the dirt beside a stranger, and decided he mattered. She couldn't lift him alone. She was small, maybe 5'4", and he was 220 pounds of mostly muscle. But she tried, adjusted, tried again. Looped his arm over her shoulders and braced herself and got him moving, inch by inch toward the wall, then toward the street. Nobody helped. Nobody offered. She didn't ask. 20 minutes later, he had drifted in and out of consciousness for most of it. He was lying on a narrow mattress in the smallest room he had been inside since childhood. One window with no curtain, just a length of floral fabric tacked at the top. A plastic chair, a hot plate on a folding table. A small wooden cross above the door. She was putting a cool, damp cloth on his forehead when he came back fully. "There you are," she said quietly. He blinked at the ceiling. "Where?" "My place. Don't move fast. Your fever's high." He turned his head slowly to look at her. She was sitting on the plastic chair pulled close to the mattress, watching him with calm, careful eyes. Dark brown, serious but not unkind. You need to stay still," she said, sure with the tone of a woman who had said that sentence to stubborn people before. "I got you medicine from the pharmacy down the block. You're going to take it, drink this water, and sleep. Everything else can wait." He almost said, "Do you know who I am?" He didn't, because in that room, in that moment, it didn't matter. And something about that felt like the first clean breath he'd taken in years. "Thank you," he said instead. She nodded once. A like thanks were a reasonable but unnecessary formality. Then she stood, moved to the hot plate, and began making something that smelled like ginger and honey. "What's your name?" he asked. She glanced back over her shoulder. "Deja." "Marcus." "I know," she said simply. And he realized she'd found his ID in his jacket pocket. Purely practical. purely to know if he had emergency contacts. She handed him the medicine. She made him tea. She sat back in that plastic chair with a worn paperback novel and read quietly while he slept, because someone needed to make sure his fever broke, and she had apparently decided, without ceremony or negotiation, that she was that someone. The city hummed and throbbed outside. Inside that small room, a billionaire slept under the watch of a woman who had spent her last $14 on his medicine without a second thought. He didn't know her story yet. He didn't know that the woman sitting 3 feet away from him in the thin October air had once worn a different kind of life entirely, one that the world had stripped from her piece by piece until only the truest parts remained. He only knew that when he woke briefly in the night, she was still there, still reading, the small lamp throwing warm light across her face. And for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Devin Cole did not feel like a resource. He felt like a person. If this story already has you feeling something, drop a like and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? I've got people tuning in from all over, and I want to see your city in those comments. Don't go anywhere. Part 2 is where everything shifts. By morning, the fever had broken. Marcus woke to sunlight filtering through floral fabric and the sound of something sizzling. He sat up slowly. His body ached in the manageable way of someone recovered rather than sick. When his phone was dead, his expensive watch was still on his wrist, untouched. Daya was crouched at the hot plate, her back to him, humming something low under her breath. On the small folding table sat 2 plates, one noticeably fuller than the other. Scrambled eggs, toast, sliced apple. He watched her for a moment. She moved in the tiny space without bumping anything, without frustration, as if she had long since made peace with every limitation of the room. There was something dignified in it. Not resigned, dignified. The posture of a woman who understood that the size of your space had nothing to do with the size of your character. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. She turned and handed him the fuller plate without comment. "Mine should be the smaller one," he said. "You were sick." She sat cross-legged on the mattress with her smaller portion. "Eat." He ate. It was the best scrambled eggs he could remember. He had eaten in Paris. He had eaten in Tokyo. But he had paid $300 for a plate of food once and found it forgettable. These eggs, made on a hot plate in a room barely big enough for the 2 of them, were something else entirely. "Do you cook professionally?" he asked. She smiled for the first time. It was a real smile. Quick, slightly crooked, like it surprised even her. "I cook practically," she said. "Different thing." He asked where she was from. She said Savannah originally. He asked how long she'd been in the city. She said 4 years. He asked what she did. She paused before answering, and something moved across her face. Not shame exactly, but the particular tiredness of someone who had learned to brace for judgment. "I'm between things right now," she said carefully. He didn't push. He respected the pause. When he stood to leave, she walked him to the door. The morning street outside was already busy. Kids running, a woman selling roasted peanuts from a cart, like the particular organized chaos of a neighborhood that had learned to make the most of what it had. "I'd like to come back," he said, "to check on you, just as a thank you." She studied him. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he said. "I want to." She looked at him a long moment, measuring something. Then, "I'm usually at the corner of 5th and Marion most afternoons, if you find yourself that way." He found himself that way the very next day, and the day after that. He learned her rhythm quickly. She arrived at the corner of 5th and Marion around 2 in the afternoon, carrying a worn canvas bag over one shoulder. She would spend several hours there, moving carefully between the cars stopped at the light, asking for help in a voice that was quiet and direct. Never begging in the desperate sense, more like someone making a reasonable request of the universe and accepting whatever answer came. The first day he watched from a distance. Sure as he sat on a bench half a block away, in his plain clothes, and he watched. A white SUV rolled its window down and a man said something that made her step back. Marcus was on his feet before he realized it, but she just nodded once and moved on to the next car. Unbothered, like she had decided long ago that other people's cruelty was their burden to carry, not hers. An elderly woman in a battered Civic gave her a handful of change and said something warm. Deja leaned into the window and they spoke for a minute, laughing about something. When she straightened back up, her whole face was lighter. Marcus sat back down. He came back the next day, and the next. Eventually, he stopped pretending he had a reason and simply sat beside her at the corner and talked. She was funny. He hadn't expected that, or rather, he felt guilty for not having expected it, for assuming that struggle would have pressed humor out of her. She had an observational wit that was precise and dry, the kind that made you think after you laughed. She noticed things. The way the traffic light took exactly 4 seconds longer to change when a delivery truck was blocking the sensors. The street vendor 2 blocks over who sang different songs depending on how his day was going. The pigeon who always sat on the same fire escape and seemed to have opinions. She was also deeply, quietly brilliant. It came out in the way she analyzed things. And one afternoon, a young man about 19 came to the corner selling phones. Clearly stolen, clearly scared. Deja watched the situation for a moment, then walked over to him, spoke low and private, and within 5 minutes had sent him on his way. Not to run from the police, but toward a community center 6 blocks north where someone she knew ran a workforce program. The young man looked skeptical. She gave him the name of a specific person to ask for, and he went. "How did you know about that program?" Marcus asked. "I've sent 3 other people there," she said. "They placed 2 of them." He looked at her. "You network from a street corner." She shrugged. "Everybody's got resources. They just don't always know where they are." He thought about his own billion-dollar company, the consultants he paid enormous fees to for exactly that kind of thinking, and said nothing. The afternoon it rained was the afternoon something shifted between them, and the sky had been threatening all day. When it finally broke open, it was sudden and total. The kind of southern rain that doesn't negotiate. People scattered. Cars honked. The corner emptied. Marcus grabbed her hand without thinking and pulled her under the overhang of a closed furniture store. They stood close. Very close. Rain hammered the awning above them and turned the street into rivers. He realized he was still holding her hand. He didn't let go. Neither did she. She was shivering. Her jacket was soaked through. He unzipped his hoodie and draped it over her shoulders without making a production of it, the same way she had given him the fuller breakfast plate without ceremony. She looked up at him. Something passed between them, real and electric and quiet. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" She considered. "Someone who would have stopped coming by after the second visit?" He met her eyes. "Sorry, I'm not going anywhere." She held his gaze for a long moment. "Okay," she said simply, like a door opening. But that was also the week the walls between them began to develop cracks, not from dishonesty, but from proximity. She started to notice small things. The way his speech shifted slightly when he was thinking seriously about something. Cleaner, more precise, less casual. The way he looked at her neighborhood with something more specific than pity. Understanding. Oh, like he recognized things. And then one afternoon, a boy about 7 years old stopped beside them at the corner. He wasn't begging. He was just hungry. You could see it in how he looked at the bag of chips Deja had just purchased from the cart nearby. Deja split the bag in half without a word. The boy took it with a mumbled thanks and ran. Marcus watched this. Then he said quietly, "Where's his family?" She was quiet for a moment. "He lives in the building on the corner with his grandmother. Han, she works nights, he gets himself to and from school. You know him?" "I know everyone on this block." She paused. "That's what people miss about this life. They see the surface and think it's random, disorganized. But there are whole systems here, whole communities, people looking out for each other the best way they can, including you." She looked at him sideways. "I just try to do my part." That night, sitting in his penthouse, a space so far removed from Fifth and Marion it might as well have been a different planet, Marcus stared at his ceiling and thought about Deja. About the bag of chips split in half without hesitation. About the young man redirected toward opportunity. About the calm, unshakable dignity of a woman moving through difficulty without losing herself. He had dated women who claimed to be philanthropic and flew to galas in rented gowns. And he had sat across the table from women who spoke about community impact while checking their stock portfolios. And none of it, not a single moment, had felt like what he witnessed every afternoon on 5th and Marion. He was falling. He knew it. The knowledge settled in his chest like something irrevocable. But with the falling came the fear, because Deja didn't know who he was. She knew Marcus, the quiet man in the gray hoodie who showed up at her corner and split bags of chips and talked about the city like someone who actually loved it. She didn't know about the penthouse, the company, the name that opened every door in every country, and he had started privately and shamefully to guard that secret. Because what if he told her and her eyes changed? What if the warmth cooled into calculation? What if she became another Priya, another Vanessa, another person who saw a resource and called it love? The possibility terrified him more than anything he had ever faced in a boardroom. But the secret was also becoming impossible to keep. Because something was happening with Deja that he could see but that she hadn't yet told him. He noticed she had stopped coming to the corner some days. Twice she appeared with a grief around her eyes that she covered with quick smiles. Once she gave away the last of what she had, every coin, to an older man outside the pharmacy, and then quietly did not buy the bread she had been planning to purchase. He saw all of it, and he knew that whatever she was carrying it alone. He had decided he would tell her everything. He would stop the charade. He would offer her everything, not as a transaction, not as a rescue, but as a partner, honestly, fully. He planned it for a Tuesday. On Tuesday, she wasn't there. Oh, the corner was empty. He waited an hour. 2. He went to the small room on the cross street where she stayed. Knocked. No answer. Knocked again. The neighbor, an older man who usually sat outside, shook his head. She left early yesterday morning. Had a bag with her. Looked like she was trying not to cry. Marcus stood in the empty street. The city moved around him, indifferent and loud. And Marcus Devon Cole, who had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions without blinking, who had stood in front of cameras in rooms full of power, felt his entire chest collapse inward. She was gone, and he had waited too long to tell her the truth. I know. Your heart is somewhere on the floor right now. Mine was too the first time I heard this story. But stay with me. Drop a comment below. Are you team he should have told her sooner, or team he was protecting himself? I want to see the debate in those comments. Like this video if you're invested. Subscribe if you want to know how this ends, because part 3 changes everything. Marcus didn't sleep that night, or the night after. He sat in his enormous penthouse in a leather chair that had cost more than most people's cars, staring at a city that was suddenly nothing more than a collection of streets he might never find her on. His security team was stationed below. His assistant was available by phone at any hour. He had, at his disposal, resources that could locate almost anyone on the planet. But he didn't want to find her that way. Tracked, located, pulled out of wherever she had gone by the machinery of wealth. He wanted her to come back. On the 3rd morning, his assistant called. Sir, there's something you need to see. It was a hospital admission notice, an alert flagged through a children's medical advocacy network that Marcus's foundation funded. A little girl, 7 years old, admitted to Atlanta Medical Center with a severe sickle cell crisis. Listed emergency contact, a woman named Deja Renee Williams. Marcus was in his car before the call ended. He found her in the hospital waiting room on the 4th floor. She was sitting in a plastic chair against the far wall, her canvas bag on the floor between her feet, her hands clasped in her lap. She was wearing the same jacket from the last time he'd seen her. Her eyes were fixed on nothing. What she looked like someone who had been at war with the world for a very long time and had recently started to lose. He sat down beside her. She turned, and for a single unguarded second, her face broke. Then she caught herself. He saw her physically hold herself together, that familiar, devastating self-discipline, and said in a voice that barely held, "You found me." "I looked," he said. A long silence. "My daughter," she said finally. It came out in pieces, like she was handing him something fragile. "Her name is Amara. She's 7. She stopped, breathed. "She's been sick since she was 2. Sickle cell. She lives with my aunt in Macon because I couldn't." Her voice fractured completely. He waited. He didn't rush her. He didn't offer immediate solutions. He just sat with her in the fluorescent light and let her tell it. And she told him everything. She had grown up here in Atlanta, second-generation college student. Her parents had both worked themselves to exhaustion to give her and her brother opportunities they hadn't had. She had gone to Spelman on a partial scholarship, studied public health, graduated with honors. She had been building something, a life with structure and intention and hope. Then she met a man who seemed like the same. She was 25. He was 30. He was charming and smart and said all the right things. And she had loved him with the kind of full-heart love her mother had taught her was possible. When she found out she was pregnant, she had been scared but not devastated. They had talked about a future. He had said the right things as always. The day she told him she'd scheduled a prenatal appointment, he didn't show up. She waited at the clinic an hour, then 2. She called. No answer. She went to his apartment. His neighbor, a kind woman who had clearly been waiting to be given permission, Masha told Deja that he had moved out 3 days earlier, taken a job transfer to Houston, left no forwarding address. She sat on the steps of that apartment building for a long time. Her parents had been her foundation through everything that followed. Her mother flying in to be at the hospital when Amara was born, her father staying a month to help, and the 3 of them building something around this small new person with her bright eyes and her big laugh and the disease running silent through her blood. Then in the space of 6 months, she lost them both. Her father, a massive stroke. Her mother 3 months later. The doctors said heart failure, but Deja believed her mother's heart had simply refused to continue without him. She was 27 years old alone, sorry with a sick child and borrowed money, and a grief so large she couldn't see past it. She had tried everything legitimate first, every social program, every assistance fund, every opportunity she could find. She was smart and she worked hard and she followed every rule, and it still wasn't enough, because the system had too many gaps, and Amara's treatment cost too much, and there were too many months between what was available and what was needed. The street corner had been a last resort, not a surrender. She had retained her dignity there in the same way she retained it everywhere. By seeing people, by knowing her neighbors, by using whatever she had to help whoever needed it, because that was the only way she knew how to move through the world. I didn't tell you about Amara, she said, because I didn't want you to think I was looking for a savior. I wasn't. I was just, she exhaled, trying to hold on long enough for something to change. Marcus looked at her. He thought about his mother, who had raised him alone after his father died, who had worked 2 jobs and never once let him see her afraid. He thought about what she had told him once. Real love is recognizing the strength it took for someone to still be standing. He reached out and took Deja's hands in both of his. I have to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. She looked at him, waiting. My name is Marcus Devin Cole. He paused. Why, you might know it. A small line appeared between her brows. I own Cole Development Group. I have for about 10 years. He watched her face. The night I collapsed on the sidewalk, I wasn't a struggling man. I was exhausted and I'd eaten nothing all day, and I was walking away from my own board meeting because I needed to breathe like a regular person for 5 minutes. He held her gaze. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid. The silence stretched. Afraid of what? She asked quietly. That you'd become someone different. He held her hands tighter. That your eyes would change the way everyone else's eyes change when they find out. That I'd lose you before I ever really had you. She was looking at him with something he couldn't fully read. He pushed forward. Everything between us was real, Deja. Every conversation, every afternoon at that corner. I wasn't studying you or pitying you or planning some grand gesture. He exhaled. When I found peace with you, and I hadn't had that in a very long time. Another silence, longer. Then, you were scared, she said slowly, that I would do to you what people have done to you. Judge you for what you have instead of who you are. Yes, she looked down at their joined hands. Marcus, she said softly, I'm a woman who spent 2 years on a street corner so I could send $23 at a time to keep my daughter in medicine. Nah, do you really think I was going to start caring about your bank account? Something cracked open in his chest. She looked up at him, and her eyes were full. I fell for the man who gave me his hoodie in the rain. The man who sat with that teenager for 40 minutes until he talked him out of something dangerous. The man who listened to me tell him about my parents and cried a little bit and tried to pretend he didn't. She shook her head. I didn't fall for a billionaire. I didn't even know there was one. He pulled her into his arms. She came, and they held on to each other in that waiting room, like two people who had been fighting toward each other across a very long distance and had finally arrived. An hour later, a doctor came to update Deja on Amara's condition. The treatment plan was manageable, but expensive, a word that had been a wall for Deja for years. She nodded, writing it down, already mentally calculating. Marcus leaned over and spoke quietly to the doctor. Set up a consultation with your head of hematology, full treatment plan, put everything on the Cole Foundation account. Deja turned to him. Marcus, I'm not your savior, he said firmly. I'm the man who loves you. This is what that looks like. Her eyes filled again. He met Amara that afternoon. She was small and fierce, with her mother's dark eyes and an opinion about everything. She looked at Marcus with open 7-year-old suspicion. And are you my mom's boyfriend? I'm working on it, he said. She considered this. Do you know how to play Uno? I'm undefeated. Everybody says that, she said skeptically, but she smiled. The next 6 weeks moved like a current. Amara's treatment team was assembled, the best in the Southeast, and Marcus knew most of them. Deja moved out of the room on the cross street, not into his penthouse. She had been clear about that, and he had respected it absolutely. But into an apartment nearby, furnished simply, where Amara could eventually come home to something stable. They had dinners, long conversations, arguments even, real ones, about real things, the kind that come from two people who both have opinions and refuse to perform agreement. He loved those most of all. He told his family about her. His Aunt Diane famously cried before she even finished shaking Deja's hand. Baby, she said, cupping Deja's face, where have you been? His mother, Dorothy Cole, was sat across from Deja at her kitchen table in Decatur and looked at her the way she looked at things she needed to understand fully before she could love them properly. And then she reached over and poured Deja more sweet tea and said, Tell me about your parents. They talked for 3 hours. When Marcus drove Deja home that night, she was quiet in a full way, not an empty way. He glanced at her. She's something, Deja said softly. She is. She asked me what my plans were for the next 5 years. She asks everyone that. She told me my answer was the right one. He smiled. Then you passed the only test that matters. 3 months later, at the opening gala for the Cole Foundation's new pediatric health initiative, a program Marcus quietly dedicated to the memory of Deja's parents, he stood at a podium in front of 500 of the most powerful people in Atlanta and told a story. He talked about a Thursday evening when he had been too tired and too empty to keep pretending. He talked about a sidewalk, about a crowd of people who did nothing and one woman who did everything. He talked about a plastic chair and scrambled eggs and the specific piece of being seen as nothing more and nothing less than a person. And then he turned to Deja, who was sitting at the front table in a burgundy gown, Amara asleep in the chair beside her, with her small head on her mother's arm. And he said, I have built a lot of things in my life, but the most important thing I ever did was collapse on a sidewalk so this woman could show me what it looks like to love without condition. He stepped off the stage. He got down on one knee. The room went so quiet you could hear the city. Deja Renee Williams, he said, I don't need someone who wants my name or my accounts or my access. I need someone who will split the last bag of chips and give the bigger half to the kid who looks hungry. Someone who will fight for what matters even when the system is designed to grind her down. Someone whose goodness is so built in it just comes out sideways, without announcement. He opened the box. Someone like you. Only you. Always you. Amara, who had woken up at some point during the speech, sat up in her chair with wide eyes. Deja was already crying, already laughing, already nodding. Yes, she said. Obviously, yes. The room erupted. Amara pumped both fists in the air. Later, when the room had settled into music and celebration, and Amara was teaching Aunt Diane's grandchildren an increasingly complex handshake, Marcus and Deja stood near the window overlooking the glittering city. She leaned against him. He kept his arm around her. "You know what's funny?" she said quietly. "Tell me. I used to look at buildings like this from the street, all lit up, and think, what does it feel like to be up there?" He looked at her. "And now?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something he would think about for years. "It feels like it's supposed to, because I didn't come up here empty. I brought everything that mattered with me." He kissed her temple. Outside, Atlanta blazed, and somewhere across town, in a hospital room that no longer carried the weight of impossibility, a small girl named Amara slept through her first full night without pain in 3 years, healed not by wealth alone, but by the stubborn insistence of a mother who never once, no matter how hard the world pressed, let go of love. And that, my beautiful people, is the story. If your heart is full right now, like this video. It genuinely helps more people find it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this. And most importantly, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And tell me, what was the moment that got you? I'll be reading every single one. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded today. Real love still exists, and it usually shows up when you've stopped looking for it, in the most unlikely place, wearing a yellow scrunchie and carrying a canvas bag. See you in the next one.